Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow reptiles, welcome to Face Palm Sunday.
I find it incredibly accurate that you made a double facepalm there, because not only was the video that you responded to incredibly facepalm worthy, but your response was almost as bad. At least you didn't come to as crappy a conclusion as she did, but honestly, do research before trying to talk down to people as if you're some sort of better intellectual, because it makes you look like a douche if you are trying to refute someone's point and being really factually incorrect about it.
And boy, do we have a special guest today. First things first, she runs the channel titled Christians Against Dinosaurs. But after giving some investigation, realizing and seeing older videos that she's made, I sincerely and genuinely don't believe that this woman is a troll. And in all honesty, I kinda wish that she was, for the sake of ignorance.
Hello. So I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about fossils that are found in the ground. And I guess I'll start a little bit about what the fossils actually are, and then go into a little bit about the composition and what they end up being when everything is said and done. So a fossil is not actually a piece of bone. A fossil is actually a bone that was once in the ground.
Whoa, stop right there. Okay, I am no geologist. I am terrible at geology, but the one thing I do know is that, yes, a fossil is a bone, and that you said that a fossil is not a bone. Then you say a fossil is a bone in the ground. You just said that. You just blatantly contradicted yourself.
Yeah, and well, she's kind of right. You sort of cut her off before she had the chance to explain that first there is a bone, and that actual piece of bone is in the ground, and then after a while it stops being a bone, and I'll explain that later, but first we're going to let her give her explanation of it.
And then you say this, which does not make any sense.
That has been then filled with limestone, calcium, and other kind of stone-like deposits over the course of many years, and at the end of the day it ends up looking like a bone, but it's not really a bone. It's really a rock instead of rock.
Having been homeschooled myself in a Christian household, I wouldn't be surprised with this line of reasoning, so I'm assuming that she's homeschooled. However, this is not simply the case with the statements that you just made about rock and limestone. One of the things that happens is you have a bone that's in the ground, an animal dies, whatever it be, and then all these different layers of sediment go over that bone, the limestone, rock, the dirt, and it preserves that bone within the rock and the limestone.
And while you may have thought that people would start palming their faces at her comments, the point where I started palming mine was after that. You see, some animals were quickly buried after their death by sinking in mud or being buried by a sandstorm or whatever. Over time, more and more sediment covered the remains, and then the parts of the animals that didn't rot, which usually ends up being the harder parts like bones and teeth, were encased in the newly formed sediment. In the right circumstances, being that no scavengers and a quick burial with not much weathering occurred, parts of the animal would be turned into fossils over time. Okay, so after a long time of being spent underground in a heavy layer of sediment, which eventually would turn to stone under the pressure of sediment, after a long time, the chemicals in the buried animal's bones would undergo a series of changes. As the bone slowly decayed, water infused with minerals seeped into the bone and replaced the chemicals in the bone with rock-like minerals. This process of fossilization involves the dissolving and replacement of the original minerals in the object with other minerals. This process results in a heavy, rock-like copy of the original object, that copy being a fossil. The fossil has the same exact shape as the original object, but is chemically more like a rock. Some of the original hydroxyapatite remains. Just for clarification, hydroxyapatite is a major bone constituent. Anyway, So that remains, although it is saturated with silica, which is essentially just rock.
And when this happens, this is how we get such amazing DNA samples, and we get such amazing preserved bones of humans, of animals, is because they've been with the sediment, and it's protected the bone, the fossil, whatever you want to call it, for thousands and even millions of years. How you seem to think that if the bone is blended with limestone and different sediments, that automatically does not make it a bone, does not make any sense, because if it was not a bone, we wouldn't be able to extract DNA from these bone samples. And to refute your entire video in one sentence, although we're going to painfully get through the rest of it, do rocks have genes? Do rocks, a rock that you find in the ground, have genes? The answer is no. And by that logic, your entire video with that one sentence is refuted due to the fact that bones have genes in them, DNA.
Alright, so let's go over what you actually got right here. Bones do contain DNA. Rocks do not contain DNA. That's pretty much all you got right. The rest of what you said was actually kinda sad to watch because you didn't refute her video. You just showed an example of how little you know about paleontology. While bones do have DNA, DNA is a protein, is a compound of some kind that decays over time, and by the time that a fossil has formed, the bone, for the most part, has completely decayed, as well as long before this, any surviving usable DNA. You can even find actual really old bones. You'll notice that these are very brittle. They're not fossils, they're still bones, but they will have very little DNA, if any, or at the very most you'll find some fragmented DNA. But even if it remained a bone, the DNA itself would not last. So I don't know where you're getting your information, but this is wrong. On a fundamental level, fossils do not contain DNA, at least not the kind of fossils that we're talking about here. There are things like amber, which is technically a type of fossil, but that is both uncommon and quite a bit different. The amber is insulatory and does kind of prevent DNA from eroding, but that's just because of lack of oxygen. Basically all decay, or at least all organic decay, happens with the presence of oxygen, and that definitely occurs in regular fossilization.
So you have a rock this big, and you say, okay, inside this rock this big, there's a bunch of fossils. Here you go. And you hand the rock off to a paleontologist, and the paleontologist takes a little mallet and they chip away at it, and at some point they come out with something looking like a bone.
This is absolutely ridiculous, and right here is the point where she stops making any sense at all and goes into full crazy conspiracy theory, whatever bull crap. You can very clearly tell a fossil from its surrounding matrix. Matrix is the stone that surrounds a fossil. Easily tell it apart because it's made from a different chemical composition as the surrounding matrix. Like, it'll literally be a different color, or at the very least have a different consistency. So you'll be able to tell the difference between it and the stone that surrounds it. It's not a hard concept to grasp. Google images and type in fossil, and you can very clearly see why this idea of people just taking a boulder and chiseling it into the shape of a dinosaur fossil is completely ridiculous.
And that's a fossil. So, here's the question that I pose.
Holy smokes, Christians actually pose questions. That's a first.
Now, the first fossil that was ever found was actually after they came up with the idea of a dinosaur. Right? That seems a little bit far-fetched, right? Why
Very, very, very far-fetched.
would the bone that was found or the fossil that was found actually be the exact same thing as what was originally hypothesized without any other evidence? It doesn't make any sense. So now I give to you. Here, you're my paleontologist. Turn that into what it was before I ripped it apart. Here. You can have some spackle too. As much spackle as you want. Here, turn this into what it's supposed to be.
Well, I can say one thing about those materials that you put on the table. It was no fossil. It's probably what was in your brain.
Alright, who knows what you're gonna come up with, right? Now, here, take this same substance, this same spackle, and by the way, it's supposed to be this little guy, Brachiosaurus, who's 40 meters tall. This is what he looks like. This is what the head was supposed to look like. This is a Brachiosaurus skull. Make me a Brachiosaurus skull. With that and as much spackle as you use. Chances are, what are you gonna come up with? If you want to keep your job, you come up with a Brachiosaurus skull. If you want to be truthful, you come up with
whatever it was that I smashed apart today.
When millions of dollars are on the line, which one are you going to do?
When millions of dollars are on the line, which one are you going to do? Well, certainly not make this type of video on YouTube, much less make an untruthful statement about millions of dollars. You can go to professional anthropologists, you can go to paleontologists, you can go to geologists, and I guarantee you, they don't make very much money. If anything, I would assume, I don't know the statistics here, but paleontologists, archaeologists, these people don't make lots of money. They do their job because they love what they do. It's not about the money. It's about the discovery of finding new things, of digging through the dirt and finding old fossils, finding history, restoring that history to know what was once happening. If you honestly think paleontologists makes millions of dollars, you are severely mistaken.
My guess is you're going to go with the Brachiosaurus. That's where the money is. So I hope this was insightful for what happens on a daily basis in the world of paleontology. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a professional paleontologist telling us that fossils are not bones.
They aren't.
And that paleontology, the whole area of that scientific study, is done for millions of dollars.
While in reality, like you said, they don't make nearly that much. They average salary between $40,000 and $80,000 a year. It's not incredibly profitable. But what I really did like about her video was that she, although clearly trying to go from a Christian perspective, did not try to justify her idea, using the Bible or using spiritual religious woo-woo, which, that's refreshing. She tried to use rationality. Unfortunately, she, to do that, had to make up a bunch of bullshit. Just remember that dinosaur bone fossil is not really a bone at all. It is like those plaster casts of your hand that you brought home to your mom in kindergarten. However, it's made of rock instead of plaster. The original skin of the dinosaur is long gone, and the fossils are the color of the minerals they contain. This has been KrowTor on the subject of paleontology. To anyone watching this, good morning, evening, and/or good night.